What's up, guys? Today we are talking about Augmentation Evoker, one of the specs that had the craziest arc in WoW history, becoming completely meta immediately from its release all the way until about season 1 of the War Within. Now, after that season 1 of War Within, it got nerfed so hard that it was basically shot in the head. It was done. You couldn't play it in any comp. It was bad personal damage, bad buff damage because it stopped buffing tanks and healers. It didn't make keys easier. It just became a completely unplayable class. Now, since then, there has been numerous buffs, numerous aura buffs, about 50% in buffs in about the last couple months or so, now that we've had it buff for a little bit. Now, I kept playing Aug even when it was absolutely tanked. Like, that's like, it was always one of my like fun alt classes. So I was playing it even when it was bad, and kind of had this idea to do like a 0 to hero with like the worst class in the game, you know, just looking for group as a DPS, which is already hard. Never mind a hated DPS that's also bad. So I was planning to do something like that, but with all the buffs that it got, it started to come back. So rather than do that whole series, because there's a lot of Augs playing now, I wanted to just take this time to talk a little bit about how Aug is right now, if it's actually back, and what still needs to be improved on it. So over the past couple weeks, like I said, when I was planning to do the 0 to hero thing, I was watching Raider.io to see where I was on my realm. And one of the goals in that series was to become #1 on my realm. And what I noticed since the most recent buff is that a lot of people who were playing other classes or playing Devastation have swapped to Aug. It went from not even being on the chart for +14s to almost being half of what Dev is. And Dev's very good right now. So it was one of the things I noticed was Kess, Lizzie McGuire. He's one of the top Augs, and he was playing Dev, and then in one day got all 18s across the board as Aug. You know, complete switch, and is, I believe, currently playing Aug. And I saw that with, like I said, a bunch of different ones where I was #2 on Zul'jin, and then all of a sudden I checked the next day and I was number like 7 or 8, and I was like, what happened? And all these people who were playing Dev swapped over and started playing Aug in their keys. So there's definitely an uptick of Aug happening in higher keys and higher groups, and I think that's kind of where Aug shines a little bit more, is in coordinated groups. So we're going to talk about that in a second. So why I think that it's working, and let's take a little breakdown of why Aug's starting to creep back in. So it's in a decent spot for personal damage. It does pretty good damage. If you've got your cooldowns, you can kind of rip on some big packs. And if you play it well, you can have good consistent damage, and you're also buffing your 2 DPS. So DPS enjoy it because they get to see big numbers, but you're also not completely, you know, just in bottom tier every time. Unless you got like a prot warrior, you're never doing tank damage. Prot warriors do insane damage. Sometimes I look and I'm like, oh man, I'm the same as a tank, but then I realize the tank's doing 4 million DPS, so I'm like, okay, that's not too bad. So, but I don't think that it's necessarily the buffs that it's giving to the tank. First of all, the tank armor buff is next to nothing. I've never had a tank be like, oh, this feels so much easier now. You know, I don't reapply it in mid combat. I just put it on in between pulls because it's really not that big. 3% healing for the healers seems like kind of minuscule, I think, when you first think like, oh, it's only 3% compared to what it was before with giving them all the intellect and stuff. But if you had an item that gave you +3% healing, that would be like super best, you know, from where you are right now in being 680, and all of a sudden you get something that gives you 3% more healing. So it does help the healer. The flip side is Aug is extremely squishy. So if you're replacing like the DK in a group and like the meta comp say, you need more healing. So it doesn't really make it easier to heal because now you need more healing than the DK did. I found that like DK Mage and Aug is a very good group. That's kind of what I've been playing with recently, and they've been blowing up packs. It's been pretty solid, and I don't think it's too much more on the healer because you still have the DK. So the DK kind of alleviates one person that you need to focus a lot of healing into, and the Aug that needs more healing it can get it a little bit easier. So that being said, I think that it's not necessarily like the buffs or, you know, the DPS boost. I think a lot of it is the CC. That's one of the things that the people I play with notice the most when I come in as Aug is, yeah, they do more damage. They're able to blow up some things a little bit quicker. But not worrying so much about having to CC things is I think the selling point. You know, I come in, I can oppressing roar right into an eons and get like a 5-second stun off rip as soon as the packs are gathered. Then I can turn around, I can upheaval, and then I can dive in, I can tail whip. If I need to, I can time skip, bring back that upheaval and do it again. And I think it's just, and then on top of that, everybody's just got like a normal interrupt. So I think that it's just, it's been the CC that's been seeing a lot of like value in the packs. Now it's not to say like the other things are irrelevant, but I've noticed that in certain polls where you have, you know, 3 or 4 casters in it, if you can, you can help alleviate that pack a lot more. I think the only other class that does something like that is Balance Druid. And if you have a good Balance Druid in your group who uses their beams right, it makes the key runs substantially easier. So being able to make it easier for people, I think is what Aug's always been kind of meta for, is making keys easier. Not necessarily just out DPSing the key, but making the key itself easier. And I think that the CC that it brings is a big part of that. Now, like I said, I usually run with the mage and unholy DK, and there's so much healing, I mean, so much CCs coming from me that they could focus on just nuking, which is especially good for arcane mage if they need to take out a prio target. The DK can work on spreading things, you know, it just makes it easier for them. Until they're already set up, they don't really need to worry about the CCs. Also, I think that Rescue Shield is heavily undervalued right now. You don't have a lot of one-shots in this season, so you don't have a lot of like, you know, rescue to get through like one big slam, but you have a lot of rot damage, like heavy rot damage. And I've noticed on things like Cinder Brew, when you get the brew on you, or you get the arcing zap, not arcing zap, whatever it is in Rookery that's like that channeling damage. If you just rescue the target and give them like one free tick, it makes it like easier to heal through for the healer. Especially if you're on Cinder Brew and you and the healer get it and you rescue him and you guys both take a tick off of it, it makes it a lot easier. And I think that the Rescue Shield is severely undervalued. And I'll throw it on people who are about to get blasted by the bazooka. You know, it saves them. There's a lot of value in the Rescue Shield, and I know that you don't typically take it, but I have been in lieu of Sleepwalk. And unless I need Sleepwalk, I think the Rescue Shield is super, super valuable. You know, like I said, Purification, Cinder Brew Dot, the Channel and Rook, all of these things, you throw a rescue on somebody and it can actually rescue them, actually save their life. And you don't need to be, because it's not like a one shot, you don't need to be ahead of it. You can see the person getting it, you have time to kind of react to it and you know, get to them and take care of them. And I think that that's a huge part too. I mean, I've saved numerous people from those dots. Now, what I think still needs improving is, I wish we could buff tanks, and that's an unrealistic wish, but I think if you could buff Prot Warrior, you would do insane damage, or they would do insane damage. And I think it'd be really funny to have Prot Warrior be a meta because of Aug that's not meta. I think that would just be pretty cool, because like every time I'm in there with the Prot Warrior, they're doing buku damage, and to just amp them up even more would be crazy, and it would add to your damage too. But that's something that's probably not going to happen. I don't think we ever get healer and tank buffs back unless they rework the class entirely. But I would like to see it solely to see what Prot Warrior can do. I think that'd be really cool. Realistically though, we're in a solid place. We've got, like I said, almost 50% worth of aura buffs over the last couple months, so I'm not expecting anything major soon. That being said, I would love to see a buff to Living Flame. Right now it hits like a wet noodle on bosses that force downtime like Cujo or Brewmaster and Cinder. When you can't hit the boss with eruptions to really extend your Ebb and Might, like you can do it to the boss who's immune in Cinder Brew, but it doesn't matter. So when you can't do stuff like that and your Ebb and Might falls off and you have that little window where if you don't have time skip, you don't have a way to jump ahead of it, you're just casting Living Flame, and Living Flame hits for like 200k. Like, it's nothing. It's so irrelevant that the only value you get from it is possibly getting Essence. So I would like to see a buff to that, because the main time you're using that is out of your buff windows, out of your cooldowns, out of any kind of like CDs you're sending. And the difference from in CD to out of CDs for Aug is so dramatic. Like, if you pop Ebb and Might and rip eruptions on like a target dummy, okay, and then you see what your DPS is, and then stop, and then just spam Living Flame for like 15 seconds, you do like 300k DPS. Like, it is so much lower than the alternative. And I don't think a lot of classes have that dramatic of a in and out of damage. Maybe mage, because I don't play mage, but the mage I play with is always like, oh, I do tank damage out of cooldown. So I think that would be nice, because it's not gonna really affect the buff value or like our real damage. It's just gonna make our like bad damage a little better. So that's something that I would like to see. I'd also like to see Sleepwalk and Cauterizing Flame being built into Aug. I think those are very like specific utility abilities that I think would make sense to be built in, or like in the path that you take, because for the Aug class tree, it's you pretty much just take like those 2 or 3. You take Verdant Embrace, Cauterizing Flame, Sleepwalk, and then you kind of ignore that side of the tree. And I wish it was just a little easier or built into the class, because those are utility abilities that I think Aug should have. Cauterize is so good in a lot of these keys. There's so many bleeds. Theater of Pain, if somebody gets hit by the chain, and Court Chop, Priory, almost the entire dungeon has some sort of bleed on it up until the very end, where you can get hit with like a harpoon or a spear or a bite from one of the lynxes. Like, there's so many dungeons that Cauterize is good in that I think like you kind of have to take it. And I think as Aug being that support class, it would make sense for it to just have that in there. So I wouldn't mind seeing that become baseline for Aug. Sleepwalk is less important. It just feels a little off to get, but I think Cauterize should be baseline. And I think that Sleepwalk should be middle tree, so that you can still get it going down the route you take, but it's not major. Those aren't major things. Anyways, and if you do, like, I take Terror of the Skies personally, so I don't take Sleepwalk unless I absolutely need to, and I don't take there's something else I don't take to get the, what's it called, Rescue Shield. So I kind of sacrifice a little bit of utility for Rescue Shield and Terror from the Skies, which is Eon Stun. Because I think those are just more valuable, unless the dungeon absolutely calls for it. Like, if you really need Sleepwalk, like you're doing the Skip and Cinder Brew or something, then yeah, you make that sacrifice. But that's all dungeon specific. Otherwise, I'm just always taking the Eon Stun and Rescue Shield, because I think those are both just very valuable pieces that you're going to use all the time throughout the dungeon. Now, so that's kind of like what I wish to see Aug do from like what we have in game right now. Now, what I would like to see in the future is if they're ever going to add hero trees. I don't know if we're stuck with these hero trees forever. I know they want it to be evergreen, but if they're going to add to them, I would like to see like a super utility support hero tree for Aug. Something that like augments the gameplay, rather than augmenting damage and healing and things like that. Something that could create different ways for groups to do keys. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Like, one of the things I was thinking of was like a pack rescue, where you could grab like 3 targets and rescue 3 people, and then it would kind of change how you did some dungeons, because you have that rescue, or like a Verdant Embrace that you could chain from one target to another, so you could just hit different targets, like one, and then like cast again, and make it like a little bit more of a heal. And I think stuff like that would just be like super cool for Aug. I don't know if people are going to agree with it. I know that a lot of people say tank Aug. I don't think that works. They're just so damn squishy. They would need a big rework with a lot of defensive utility brought in. But as far as like adding like a hero tree that just makes them more support, I think that's something that could very well be possible. So all that being said, where does Aug stand right now? Aug, I think, is in a very good position. I think it's very viable. I think you can do most of the top keys, title keys, no problem as Aug. I'm currently in like 15s. I kind of picked them up a little, like I said, right before all the buffs happened, and it feels good. I don't feel like I'm hindering my group at all. I feel like if I'm in with good classes and good players, you really see the effects of Aug. And it's the same as it was before. If you're with bad players who aren't using CDs at good times, then you kind of see, you feel that too. So but on its own, like personally, I think Aug is in a pretty good spot. It does good personal damage. It does good buffs, and it creates a kind of synergy, or you kind of need to create a synergy within your group for it to really shine. But you don't feel completely gimped if somebody's not performing in your group. Even if somebody dies, you don't really feel like, you definitely feel it, don't get me wrong, but your personal damage is good enough to like hobble the group over the finish line. If you're fighting a boss, you don't have a battle rest, someone dies at like 20%, it doesn't just like cripple the entire rest of the fight. You can still kind of get through, provided you're playing okay, so I think it's in a good spot. Like I said, I've been playing it since it was bottom tier, and now I've been playing it. I'm at like 3.2k IO, and I don't think it's meta, which is good. I don't think it necessarily needs to be meta. I don't think people need to think it's meta, because I think that was one of the bigger parts, was that people felt like they needed Aug in groups, and they didn't. And because they thought they needed them, it took away from other players being able to get in with different classes, and it created a hatred for Aug. But like if you're doing 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, actually maybe last season, if you were doing like the higher end keys, like close to title, you didn't need an Aug. Like you could do it without one. It wasn't like it was necessary. It made life a little easier, but you didn't need it in, like, especially in like 10s and 11s. Like that was the biggest issue, is that the lower keys felt like they needed Aug, and Aug's not particularly good in lower keys. It's usually only good in the higher stuff. And so this like idea that you needed it caused a really, really bad dynamic in Mythic Plus. So it not being meta, but it being good enough to be played, is I think a very good spot for Aug. And we'll see what they do with it. I think if they're gonna give it any more buffs, they just need to buff the damage that's bad on it, and like the downtime damage, so that it doesn't feel horrible on certain bosses. But I don't think they need to bring in any more like that, like group buffs and stuff like that, because then I think it's going to become a little too strong. All right, so, well, if you're an Aug fan, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you're seeing more Augs. I haven't seen more outside of me personally in game, but I've seen more showing up on Raider IO runs and logs and things like that. So let me know if you're seeing it, and if you enjoyed my kind of opinion on Aug, follow, subscribe. I'm going to be playing a lot of Aug on the channel now, so if you're looking for some Aug content, subscribe, and until next time, guys, see ya.